Hello and welcome. You're with the Economic Times, and we're discussing something very important today: the consumer goods industry and the way the industry is going direct to the consumer. So over the next 90 minutes or so, we'll be talking about that. So first, let's look at the video that we prepared for this. So it's the all-important discussion. So let's just put a little bit of context to that. The buzzword in the industry is direct to consumer. And that's what is the big buzzword in the consumer markets. FMCG brands, and there are dozens of them, they're looking to reach out to consumers in a way that's different than before. Their approach is different, and so the tools that are being used to reach out to the end consumer. There appears to be a fundamental shift, a fundamental change in the way companies are looking to reach out, and that is why there's so much of interest in the changes that are happening. And this interest is not just from the companies themselves. If you see the ecosystem, there are small pockets of change which, when they add up, they look the kind of change. They give you a sense of the kind of change that is happening. You'll hear the names of new brands. Established brands are trying to leverage their heft in working in the new way. But the pillars on which these new companies are built are significantly different compared to the ones that you, as a consumer, are used to. The oxygen that runs the newer companies is also very different. And the big common factor that everyone is trying to reach the consumer, but they're trying different ways. That is the important. That's the important thing. So how are the D2C companies or the direct-to-consumer companies creating a compelling value proposition? We try to understand that, and today I have a very esteemed panel of speakers with me joining to talk about that. Harshvardhan Agarwal, director at Imami, he's here with us. Varun Alag, co-founder and CEO of Honasa Consumer, also known as Mama, that's a brand. Manish Chaudhary, CEO, co-CEO, I should say, of Wow Skin Science. Manish Gupta, Managing Director and Client Group Lead Products at Accenture. And Anurag Gupta, Managing Director and Lead Strategy and Consulting, Accenture. We also were supposed to have Neeraj Garg from Hindustan Coca-Cola, but it looks like there is something urgent which he has to attend to, and he could not join. We'll see if he can join us a little later. So that's the lineup for today, and we'll be talking about all the issues around, including technology. Very important part of all this is technology. But first, I'd request Anurag Gupta if he can give us a sense of the changes that are happening in the entire marketplace, and what are some of the threads that one needs to keep an eye on in the changes that are happening. Anurag.
Thank you, Ashutosh, and morning to all my co-panelists. I mean, as Accenture, we've been continuously doing research with consumers over a period of time, and if we obviously this industry is there to service and serve our consumers. We've always found, and based on that research, that the traditional or the conventional FMCG model in India was built on 2 or 3 key pillars. One is, to build brands with millions of consumers, you needed to reach out to them to build awareness, consideration, and so on and so forth. And hence, mass TV advertising used to be one of the key platforms for building a brand. And then to distribute your products to various consumers, to make them reach the consumers, you needed to have a very strong distribution setup, which could service millions of kiranas, thereby servicing our consumers. That has always been, I would say, while that's the model in India, but it's been a constraint to meeting every consumer need out there. As a result, the traditional FMCG corporates have always struggled to really, service a lot of the consumer needs and segments where this traditional model would not really allow it to. Now, what's happened of late is with the whole digital first or direct to consumer model, with online commerce and consumer behavior shifting online. There are a lot of consumers online. It's much easier to understand what they need. It's much easier to service them without going through the constraints of the traditional FMCG model. And that's where we are seeing the emergence of digital first or direct to consumer brands getting built. Obviously, there are some very successful startup companies which have demonstrated success, which have identified the right consumer unmet needs and serviced them, bypassing the traditional FMCG model. And there are also corporates now, which are essentially realizing the potential of servicing their consumers and their needs in the categories they are in through this model. So we are going through very interesting times where we will see both these models sort of coming together. The routes could be different, but clearly I see the emergence of D2C or digital first as something that will help service our consumers better. Now, the business models required would be different. The capabilities required would be different, and we'll be very happy to sort of understand from our co-panelists as to how they are seeing it, how they are building really these capabilities, and what challenges they're seeing through as they sort of try and build a business around this.
Okay. So that's the key part that I picked up, Anurag, there was the way markets would be kind of pushed, and brands would push their communication to mass markets using television. And that's the way you have grown up in the 80s, 90s, when those big brands, and even a little later maybe. But for someone who has built a brand like that, let me toss it to first Harshvardhan here from Imani. Harshvardhan, how has this experience, how is the change that you're feeling? And also one important question which I want all the panelists to answer, all the companies, so to say, to answer is, why are CPG businesses considering a direct-to-consumer business model, or why are they looking at it? If you can answer that, please.
Thanks, Ashutosh. What I believe, Ashutosh, that D2C business is something. The COVID, it was always there before the COVID, but there is no doubt that COVID has acted as an accelerant to many of such trends, be it dramatic shift to the e-commerce, and also some of the evolving consumer behavior and preferences. We are seeing big shift and changes in consumer behaviors as well. So even for traditional CPG companies, I believe that D2C is a big opportunity. Apart from what they have been doing in the past, the traditional way of marketing, now it opens up a totally different way of reaching to the consumers, talking to them, and maybe specifically targeting an audience which was earlier not possible. For example, I will say, like even in the entertainment industry, when multiplexes were not there, in comparison to when they started booming all across India in cities, etc., it gave birth to new genre of movies where filmmakers, entertainers, targeting a specific audience, they could create that kind of a movie and reach to them. So
Mhm.
similarly here, even in D2C, I think there is enough opportunity, lot of opportunity to be there. In fact, we are very excited about this whole opportunity because it gives so much of new things that you can do. Typically, if you say, even the CPG companies are supposed to do two things brilliantly, and that is innovation, and the other is talking about that innovation to the consumers.
Mhm.
And even in D2C, I think that doesn't change, because you still need to innovate. And how do you talk about the innovation to the consumers? I think these two are the most important thing which has always been there for all CPG companies. And even if you move to a D2C model also, it's going to be there.
Mhm. Okay. So let me ask Varun to step in now. Varun, the same question to you. Why are CPG businesses considering that? And more so because a brand like yours getting to ride this wave, how would you describe the opportunity? And of course, we'll come to the other details once we understand this from you.
Hey, Ashutosh, thanks for having me as part of the panel. I think when we started our journey, for us, D2C was more by default than by design. I will not lie. And I mean, we had limited money. We had a specific niche target audience to reach, which were parents who were looking for evolved, clean label options early on. And the best way to reach and by design sort of was D2C, because it is and when I say D2C, I'm also taking e-commerce into account, so Amazon or the marketplaces, right? So because you can specifically target the right consumer, instead of what you talked about, traditional marketing, which I refer to as outbound marketing, where you just throw a lot of marketing out there, assume that the consumer will actually see that message, and not necessarily knowing what context they're in, and will they receive that message in the right wavelength or not. And on the other hand, digital usually follows inbound marketing, which is where it starts with someone searching for some kind of a solution, right? And which is start of a content journey, and how do you figure out how to connect that to your product and make that sale happen, right? So I think for us that was like a natural choice, because we were trying to reach out to a very specific audience. We had no money and we were bootstrapped early on, and even after we raised a little, we had little money, right? I mean, not to be able to take on giants who Harsh's hair, who have such large kitty of ANP with them, right? So I think for small young entrepreneurs, it's a natural way to reach, and you can reach out to the right consumer. You can start small. You don't need to open multiple supply points. We started just from Delhi, one warehouse, right? But it does not limit you from your reach, right? Even with that, presence, you can actually reach out to over 25,000 pin codes just sitting out of one location. So I think that's what has clearly over time and created the whole the whole wave where everyone now seems to be talking about D2C, and it's become very relevant at scale for companies, whereby large CPG companies are also seeing that as an opportunity, because never before has the core moat of FMCG in India, which was numeric distribution, and been challenged the way it has been challenged now. And because even when modern trade came in, it reaches to about 1200, 1300 pin codes, right? I mean, and then a catchment around it, right? But in this case, you have ability to reach out to 25,000 pin codes, and if you see that's from a urban coverage perspective, that is very deep distribution, and that combined with the fact that the consumer is undergoing a big mega trend of individualization from family choices moving towards individual choices, right? Where they're looking for specific brands, specific propositions which are of their core interest, right? That put together just creates a massive case for going D2C.
Okay. So let's ask also a sense from another brand which has been in the D2C space and has grown there. Manish Chaudhary, your take on
Yeah. So
D2C, and also if you can refer to the challenges you face.
I'll do a continuation on what Varun has added. I think Wow and Mamaearth are two great brands today. But I like to rephrase the word what you caught up with, ride the wave. I think it's very important to say that the world's changing and it's changing rapidly. I think to start with that, let's just talk about how e-commerce has been evolving around the West to start with. 50% of health and beauty products is sold online, right? When we started off in 2013, uh, and India was just about taking off on the internet revolution with Flipkarts of the world, Amazons of the world. Amazon was a serious player to come into this category. So I wouldn't like to say the word ride the wave. I think it's here to stay. It's about great companies who adapt towards it. Why we chose to go through D2C was very clear. It was easiest way for us to reach out to customers. I think D2C is a level playing field on distribution, which is so critical, right? It gives you a level playing field with the giants, because I today, what do consumers want? They want something unique, innovative, and brands like us, the worlds of Mamaearth, Vows, all need to be really servicing consumers to be staying ahead of the curve. And I think we're just about the right time. I'm a strong believer that this decade is going to build a lot of great brands out of India, and it's going to be iconic coming out of here. But D2C is just about starting off in India. We've both got great chance of making it massive. Just look at how, at the speed of which D2C brands are building today, right? We're competing with brands who have built businesses for 40, 50 years. And guys like us are catching up within 5 to 6 years on building a great business. So I think it's a long way ahead for us, but I think we're on the right way. This consumer goods is, in at least in our category, is supposed to surpass 5 billion in the next coming years, and out of which 15 to 20% will come from online. So I think there's a huge opportunity for us. But strong believers, I think it's great for consumers, because, and I think tier 2, tier 3 are going to be some cities are going to be the great beneficiaries here, because they are the ones which have not been given the best of brands on availability, and brands on D2C side servicing 25,000 plus pin codes. I think this is going to be a very interesting time for India.
Okay. So there's a tech element to this as well, because what Anurag referred to in the beginning as, you go mass market, and then of course, tech is enabling that in a very big way. Let's ask Manish Gupta here. Manish, your take on this mass customization, if I may use the word, that may be possible today at a scale which is never thought of or never implemented before. One, and how are the D2C brands differentiating themselves?
Right. Thanks, Ashu. So essentially, I think in addition to what has been said, right, I think what is also helping the whole infrastructure in India, right, the whole mobile penetration and the internet penetration, which is expanding so heavily, which basically also provides an opportunity for the new brands in order to reach. The second point on personalization, as have been talked about, right? The consumers are willing to have a personalized experience. And I mean, D2C brands works in two cases, right? One in terms of where we have a, I mean, high value price, where there's a real differentiation on the product and the customization which is possible. The other places where it's a high usage but low priced, where the companies are also looking at subscription models. So, I mean, in terms of when I can essentially replicate, and there's Dollar Shaving Club, there's Bombay Skin Company, right? In terms of where you essentially can replicate that. So that is also working out. I think specifically on tech, uh, I would say the evolution of the technology is also helping in the whole setup, and it's becoming. I mean, because the D2C requires a massive investment, right? In terms of it is not just websites and whole supply chain on the back of it to enable it on that. So, as Manish was saying, right in the beginning, that and I was reading some of his videos as well. So essentially, I mean, it's a require a very different mindset in terms of technology. Technology exists, right? And three things which essentially needs to be taken into consideration is the mindset, skills, and the investments. And I think the new digital native companies has its own set of um, uh, the things when they start with, and the large companies have the challenges when they are already established and they onboard on a journey on D2C. It's creating a new business. So yeah.
Okay, so let's try and understand the success factors, or what makes B2C companies be a little different, and of course what makes them succeed as well. So what are the key drivers? Let's ask Anurag for that. What are the key drivers, Anurag, as you see it? Do all these attempts at DTC succeed? Because the market is fiercely competitive. So can you define some of those success factors?
I think, I mean, we've all spoken about the huge opportunity in India which D2C can service, but I mean, it's not a wave, and it's not that you can apply D2C or digital first business model on any part of the CPG business, because clearly one, it has to service an unmet need. If there is already something that's being taken care of, consumer needs are being taken care of, and then you come up with a Me Too product and say, hey, let me leverage a DTC business model and become successful, you're not going to. The fundamentals of business don't change.
Mhm.
The fundamentals of business will always be that you have to find an unmet consumer need and you will not be the only one. There will be others also who will be sort of tapping into it and offer a differentiated value proposition. Now, that value proposition earlier was largely led by the product. Going forward with D2C, it is product plus the experience. So what gets added as a success factor is not just the product, but also the experience of the engagement. So, and Varun spoke about inbound marketing, right? So it's not about just doing some random email marketing, but it's about being able to build capabilities to identify who's that consumer, what their need is, and then what are the right messages can I offer them? Can I personalize my messages to that consumer so that it's relevant to him or her, rather than just sort of ride some sort of a marketing infrastructure that might be getting built. Right, we have a lot of the hyperscalers, and there's a lot of infrastructure, and like Manish said, a lot of technology out there.
Mm-hmm.
Critical success factor is how do you build a business model which is consumer first, which is a differentiated proposition with product plus an experience, and it is obviously relevant to our target consumers. The other thing is, when I'll just pick on what Manish said about mindsets. This requires a different mindset. If we look at conventional FMCG model, and today everybody is listed, They all are in the high EBITDA margin ranges. They all earn and have enjoyed very high valuations. Any new business that you would want to incubate, you would expect the same level of profitability that it should deliver. You would use the same organization that you might have to sort of incubate and build a D2C business. I think that is a recipe for disaster, because D2C requires completely different set of skills. Your marketing skills are not mass marketing skills, it's personalized marketing skills on the back of digital. Right? Your supply chain that you need will be different. It has to be aligned to marketplaces, it has to be aligned to, if you have your own brand.com, it has to be aligned to that. Your fulfillment models, you should be able to, if it's your own brand.com, you should be able to deliver, within the 4 hours or the 8 hours. You can't have 2 or 3 warehouses across the country and say, I'll deliver it across 25,000 pin codes. So the business models are very different. The capabilities and the teams required to deliver are different. The propositions that you can sort of tap into will have to be obviously the ones which are value adding to our consumer base.
Okay.
Across the entire operating model, business model, I think the capabilities are different. If we get that right, it's a great opportunity for both current corporates as well as new entrepreneurs to really build a successful business.
Okay, so just to point out, there are questions already coming in from people who are watching. So we'll take the questions, keep them coming. We will take those questions to the experts here. So please keep them coming. Let me take the next question to Harshvardhan there, because he spoke of the opportunity that is emerging and that you're excited with it. In the context of what Anurag mentioned, how are you seeing the opportunity? How's that mindset working, Harshvardhan?
See, I think we are looking at D2C from various factors. First of all, it's an opportunity for us also to enter into many categories as a company where we were not present. Because certainly, takes away the advantage which the established players have in that category, right? So obviously that is something, how we are looking at, to enter into new categories. Second is, how do we further, even in the categories like personal care, healthcare, how do you come out with more innovative products and target specific consumer sets or target specific geographies, which might not have been possible earlier? Though, so that is another leg, how, where we see opportunity. And another important thing which I believe, is that anybody or any company, they will always have limited resources. And when I say resources, it's not only from the perspective of money or investment, it's also from the perspective of the skilled manpower, quality manpower, and which is very, very important. And hence we believe that we cannot do everything, right? And we are very open to have partnership with some of the very exciting D2C brands which are coming up, in terms of how we can partner with them in terms of investment, how we can bring in our strength into what they do, what they are good at, and how can we multiply the overall coming together of this partnership rather than just adding to it, right? I think hence, looking at all these opportunities, we believe, there are enough room play, enough areas, where we can really do some exciting things in the future.
Okay, so what are some of those opportunities emerging, and how can new opportunities emerge? Let me ask Manish Gupta that, Manish, because we're talking of the kind of data that can be leveraged. Can you give a sense, a broad picture, Manish, of the kind of opportunities that open up?
I think as I was mentioning, from opportunities, and Anurag also mentioned, the ability, and I mean, one of the things which was said in the beginning, that it reduces and make a direct connect with the consumer, right? Or have an ability to capture something called first party data, right? In terms of some attributes about your consumer. And most of the companies, as they just get their mobile number, not even the email ID, right? But the potential is that while we have that information, but if you can correlate with the social presence of that particular individual, because that particular individual is present in Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. So you know what is the structure of this, what is the social status of this person, what is the family type, what is the likes, and then you can have a very specialized campaign to that particular person, right? So there are a lot of marketing, as Anurag was saying, that we receive so many emails and WhatsApp, etc. We don't read all those, right? But if I get a very personalized campaign with reference to that, it will give a very different perspective. I mean, we were talking to one of the wellness player in India, and and we were just crafting a journey in terms of what could enable, and the person generally reaches to the center and have given. But if the same person is traveling and travels quite a bit, and they travel to different city, when he enters that city or that store, he can already be known, right, and greeted by the name, and then we can already give offers on the birthday, etc. So events creates a immense possibility. We work with a large beauty and personal care company in India, and already implementing the results are quite interesting.
Okay, so Manish Chaudhary, let me go to and ask a little bit about what it takes to build that capability. When you were building the company over the last 7 to 8 years, how was it different from running a traditional business? And if you can share your experience, and what were some of those challenges that you faced in building that?
So we just started off as just a startup which was headless, right? We tried everything and anything under the roof when we wanted to. I mean, I think there's nothing what we have not tried. But something which is really like core to us is towards speed and agility. One is speed at which we react, speed at which we create, and agility on the way how we execute. I think that is something which is extremely vital for a D2C brand today if you want to be disruptive. Also in that is also the art of listening to customers, and that is something which is core to us too. Is we have also been in a phase of business when we love to sell products what we wanted to sell as founders, and when you switch and you topple it around and build products for what customers want, I think that was something which we continue to try to master. I wouldn't say that we have reached there, but eventually I think phase wise, on a goal wise, using data analytics, AI, a little bit more understanding on how do you build those kind of structures. So I think building D2C is the best way forward for anyone who's trying to create it, whether it's a large organization for years who have stayed, as well as anybody with a creative idea and saying that, you know what, I want to try it. That's the beauty of the internet today. So I think continue to urge. It's something which is exciting, and I think only consumers are going to benefit about it. And I think corporates or organizations, founders who have that knack of picking up what consumers are wanting and then continue to build excitement, product innovation, I think will cut the clutter from the rest. So I think we are all evolving around that. It's too early for us to say. It's a long way for us. The opportunity online is so huge that you can scale so easily, but at what cost? And that cost is extremely a big question mark on when we take decisions. Is it because you got so many levers of growth opportunities? So I think it's very exciting, but also how to build it on D2C and not get carried away, because remember on the digital side, more you sell doesn't mean more profits. It's more losses what you can create. So how do you balance that? That is something which all of us, I think, at least at our end, will continue to try to master. We're not yet reached there, but as we get larger, as well as we age, I think that is something which we'll pick up.
Okay. Varun, what's your experience? Manish Chaudhary seems to suggest picture abhi baki hai. How would you see it?
No, picture to for sure abhi baki hai. I think fundamentally there are a few things which are changing, right? I mean, like I said, one, the whole movement from family consumption to individual consumptions, right? If you go back a decade, most bathrooms would have like a single personal care product which the entire family used to consume, and now you would find two to three, let's say face washes or shampoos, etc. And because people are realizing they have different skin types, different kind of needs, and they're wanting to make different kind of choices which are more suited to them, right? And this trend is just starting, and it's only 5 odd years old, and this is a mega trend. It is not going away anywhere. It's probably going to last decades, right? And this trend will lead to creation of more targeted brands with targeted propositions, and hence now is when the choice proliferation and brand creation is starting to happen for the Indian market, which in most categories had just 6 to 7 brand offerings present, right? Now you would probably see in next 5 years in each category 100 plus brands being present, and the tail having 20 to 25% share, right? Which is what is going to be very different. So I think that is a structural trend. And secondly, I think with disposable income going up, and it seems the world is betting on Indian economy this decade, right? And if disposable incomes continue to grow up, people will want to make better choices. People would want to trade up, and all of that would lead to, again, people making more discernible choices, right? Leading to increased premiumization, leading to increased category adoption, leading to increased, again, e-commerce adoption, and I think that's also happening. And third, more and more, as people get access to smartphone internet across Bharat and not just India, and the awareness is increasing, and the ability to reach for young brands like us is increasing, and then also ability to convert that into a transaction through e-commerce is increasing, and which is just tipping the scale in terms of how large can this be, right? And hence the questions around profitability. If things are small, and either they're too small and they can remain profitable, and or they can be large and you can have economies of scale, and in the middle is where you get hurt the most, right? So I think now you will have choice to run niche businesses which are profitable, and you will also have choice to scale them up across India and probably global landscape as well, because all of these playbooks which we work on are fairly replicable in nature. The kind of stacks that they are built on, Facebook, Google, Amazon, all of those, right, are same across, right? So and you can hence become large and sort of manage that problem. So I see a very, very bright future, and we are all in.
Okay, looks super.
Let me just chime in just for facts. Running through a marketplace on how much competition we have, we're fighting 24,000 brands online. So just giving guys a flavor that it's not a shelf space that we guys are fighting in a GTMT. We're fighting 24,000 listings and algorithms online.
Yeah, so that's why picture abhi baki hai. Okay, so Varun's point about the rural markets also caught my attention, and there seems to be a question there. And let me just scan through some of the questions. So one question has been, and that question comes from Akshat Kharbanda, who's saying the FMCG sector is shifting its focus towards rural markets, while the D2C marketing model of personalized internet marketing is immensely successful in urban areas. Do you believe D2C will see similar success in rural India? Can I take this question to Harshvardhan, please?
See, I think yes. See, the consumers, whether they are in urban or rural, the consumer mindset, I would say overall is similar. They want something new, they want something more, they want to try newer things, they want more value to the products what they get, and above all they want more choices. And certainly D2C does all of these things. So yes, maybe the extent of success or the volume might not be as much as the urban because of the cost involved.
Mhm.
But yes, rural also going forward gives a good opportunity, at least for the people who can afford a particular price point. Because in DTC, I think the biggest challenge is that each individual product has to reach from a warehouse to an individual's residence
Mhm.
or an address. So that cost has to be viable, right?
Mm. Anurag, the rural, because that is one, I mean, that is the real strength of the traditional companies, CPG companies, because of the expansive supply chain also that they have. How does that play out, or how does that matter in the new scheme of things?
I think, I mean, if there is, I mean, geographically, if we were to see if there is one biggest geography or tier that will get the benefit of D2C, that will be rural. Because while, conventional FMCPG companies have had that strong distribution strength, but it is still a very small proportion of their portfolio that reaches the rural store. And if you see a typical Kirana store in a rural town, it'll only be stocking the highest selling SKUs of any brand. And it'll only be selling a few brands and then a few local products. Now DTC, and Varun mentioned, Manish mentioned, 25,000 pin codes. You have marketplaces which now have the delivery infrastructure, last mile, as well as the supply chain to reach 25,000 codes. So suddenly the options available for our consumers in rural go up significantly, and the constraints of distribution DTC is able to take away. So I see massive advantage of potential growth coming from rural and the smaller tier 3, tier 4 towns, because it takes away the constraints of distribution, provides access to a much larger portfolio, and with some of the other trends that, for example, Varun mentioned about from family to individual consumption, that's not just an urban trend. I mean, that's something that's playing out even in smaller towns. And aspirations of our consumers, are similar across. Everybody wants to move up, use better products, use products that are more suited to them. But access of those products is a big challenge. So DTC is a huge advantage, and I think the question was more around, can we do personalized internet marketing to be able to drive DTC in rural? I think that comes in later. Just the access through DTC to the smaller towns and rural markets would itself be a huge growth enabler, and something that will meet a lot of needs of our consumers in rural. So, I mean, absolutely, it's one geography, smaller towns, rural, that's going to benefit a lot from this whole wave, as you call it.
Okay, let me take the next point again to Harshvardhan and ask about some of the learnings. Because if you look at Harshvardhan, just a different sector. Look at what's happening with banks, and those new banks are probably entering in areas which are very profitable for the banks and trying to make a business case for themselves. How are you, as a CPG company, learning from some of the what the D2C brands are doing? And of course, you can replicate that as well in some of your efforts.
Ashutosh, I think there's a lot to learn. The way the D2C brands or companies are doing their business today.
Mhm.
I think some of the very important things in the last 2-3 years, what I have learned from these companies is, one is, for sure, the speed. The speed at which these companies move or do things. I think that is something what all CPG companies need to learn. Right from the timeline a CPG company takes to launch a new product, right? And vis-a-vis if you compare to a D2C company. So how do you adapt to that kind of working? Second is, don't worry about failure. Take risk, keep testing as much as possible. You will be able to manage it. Right now, CPG companies, they do thousands of research before going to the consumers, and hence, again, adding to the overall timeline, and also, I would say restricting the innovations what they are able to do. right? I think that is something again we as CPG companies need to adapt to taking risk and not worrying about failures. I think third would be, how do you do data-based marketing? Something which is what we are talking about, personalized marketing. How do you appeal to a consumers? How, even for the same product, how can you have different campaigns for different consumers basis his or her requirement, need, or aspirations, right? I think those are, again, it is very easy to say, but yes, these are not so easily achieved. But yeah, these are the things which everybody, right from CPG companies or D2C companies, they need to move forward. And I think another very important thing is, as Manish was saying, in D2C, there are so many options for the consumers, right? And hence, brand loyalty is also a challenge. So, what will be most critical is, how do you develop a meaningful relationship with the consumers? How do you engage in a manner that you are able to build that relationship and hence bring down your cost of getting newer consumers always, and at the same time build a strong loyal base of consumers? So I think these are the few things which I believe, are very, very important, for us CPG companies, if we want to move forward and succeed in these areas.
Okay, I just have a follow-up question, Harshvardhan. Uh, Typically, maybe 5 years ago, how long would it take you to launch a product after it is cleared at the drawing board? And today, what does it take?
See, I would say earlier, uh, the fastest would might be a year, but it would go up to 2 years, and maybe for some multinationals, it might go up to 3 years as well, right? And today, even internally, we target ki why can't we launch a new products after conceptualizing in 3 months? So that's obviously you cannot achieve 3 months always, but yeah, 3 months to 6 months is the broader timeline that we want to achieve.
Okay, Manish Chaudhary, how do you, 3 months to 6 months, is it too long for you for a D2C brand?
It see, as you get larger, I think your responsibilities to customers gets immense, right?
Correct.
And product is so important. We could have, if you see, we have always been a little, I mean, a bit too innovative. If you see apple cider vinegar shampoo, we were the first to launch even the onion range. We had a face wash brush, which was actually a shoe brush, which we converted into a face wash with a bristle in it. We were ahead of that. So I think as you get larger, your responsibility to your loyal base of consumers, because one wrong product or one wrong experience can really dilute what you have created. So I think as we get larger, we continue to go a little bit more deeper on ensuring customer experience is top class, and that's something which we continue to do. 3 to 6 months. I think it's great to hear Harsha wanting to achieve that. That's what we used to. But we are looking at anywhere between 6 to 9 months right now, because testing. And do remember, we depend on a lot of data at our end too. It's not depending on third party. We have never gone to third parties for a lot of things which conventional brands do. We try to do that more in-house, do a lot of checks, speaking to consumers who have bought it, lot sizes, blind testing. So I think as we get larger, we have the same problems like our larger competition. Is how do you be responsible to your consumers? So I think 6 to 9 months is great, because you have to go with a better story and a better product beating competition, and that's something which is very important. So I think 3 to 6 months is awesome. We used to do it at that, but we learned that you spend a little bit more time on the product, because you've got such a big base of consumers today. You really don't want to upset them with the wrong launch.
Okay, Manish Gupta, does as we splice data even more, as we learn more, as the the kinds of data that can be accessed, that as that expands, Can we cut down that time using the data closer to, obviously real time is not possible, but getting closer to that is what everyone would like to do. How do you see it?
Right, it's a very interesting conversation, right? Because you see two ends of the companies, right? One, I would say, a young company, as I call it, they try to become a mature company, and what is happening? The mature company is trying to move towards the becoming a little young company. So I think we were having a similar conversation on the topic with uh, a large consumer goods company, have global presence and also in India. What they are trying to do, because there are so many internal processes in play, right? And there are a lot of responsibility which comes as a part of the larger organization. What they are also trying is essentially uh, testing the products closely with the third-party companies. So rather than completely launching a new product or a new shampoo bottle or a bit of a variant, they go to the external companies, get a product innovation done. So outside of the bureaucracy of the company, do a very small trials, right? And test the market in terms of the customization. And really in terms of, I mean, once it scales up and show early results, then really put that. And then what they're also looking at in terms of working a collaboration with the third parties and investing in that, so the innovation keep on going. Absolutely, data comes into an important aspect to that in terms of how consumers are reacting, and also not just the data, right? How we launch these products and leveraging some of the components of AR, VR, artificial intelligence, and virtual reality, that becomes very important as well. And some of the companies during the pandemic have started leveraging that particular aspect as well.
Okay, Varun, some of the challenges that you face, while the opportunity is pretty huge and it's pretty obvious that as you scale up, the opportunity grows as well, and that part of the pie is also growing. What are some of those challenges that you face? Are you getting the right kinds of people to drive the business, and maybe some of those others that you'd like to mention?
I think hiring, of course, continues to be one of the strongest challenges, and especially as the panel has been talking about technology and data. And while yes, it's critical in our business, and but technology and data is super critical in a lot of other businesses also, which are far more deep tech in nature. And there is a war out there when it comes to technology and data talent, right? And hence being able to attract the right talent and being able to then keep them engaged, retain them, and get them to sort of deliver phenomenal product visions that you have, right? And I think that is one of the core challenges. I think the second one, which Manish also touched upon, was the intensity of competition going up significantly. 3 years back, this 24,000 number probably might have been less than 10,000, or probably less than even 1,000, and hence it was far easier to sort of break the clutter and reach out to your consumer. And now, while we have data and we do a lot of listening and basis which we are coming up with relevant innovations, and but they also get replicated very quickly because everyone is watching and looking, okay, these guys know how to do this, right? So let's just follow the lead, right? And hence the intensity has gone far above. And but I think in the longer term, one truth that will sustain is that finally this is about building a brand in the mind of the consumer, right? And mediums might change, and the platforms might change, and but it is that relationship and what you stand for your consumer that matters most. And if you can get that right over time, you're building the most sustainable moat that there is. So I think while there is a short-term challenge, but companies who are focused on building that in the longer term will still sustain and scale. And apart from that, of course, day in, day out, there are multiple challenges that keep going on. We're in a challenging environment itself as we speak, and which hopefully should get over soon. But those two, I would say, are come on top of my mind in terms of building a business right now.
Okay, also we'll try and understand it from the traditional CPG companies' point of view. Harshvardhan, in your opinion, what are some of those challenges that you see, and some of those, how are you guys, how is a company like Imami and several others like Imami using or even acquiring data for their DTC journey? Because at the beginning you mentioned that you were excited with this opportunity. So how are you building that?
See, I think the biggest challenge, for established CPG companies would be the already established processes, mindsets, the way of working. So how do you change this? And this change cannot only happen in one or two functions. It's not that you just bring this change in the marketing function or the R&D function, etc. It has to be a very holistic change, across the organization, across functions, across levers, as to how do you adapt to this new way of working as well, right? And I think that's something obviously a bit a challenge, but I wouldn't say it is something which cannot be achieved. But yes, it's not easy to be achieved, right? So one part is that. Second is certainly the skilled and quality manpower. I think that's because this is again a new industry, new sector. There are not too many people who will have this skill set. There are few people, and I would say a big gap between demand and supply, because the demand is so much. There are so many CPG companies who are being well funded now, the D2C brands, right? So everybody wants to grow, everybody wants to have the quality manpower. So I think these two are the biggest challenge which I foresee, you know in any for anybody, be it the CPG companies or the D2C companies.
Okay. Okay, Anurag, wanted to understand from you. The word mindset has come up several times during the conversation, and that tells you that there needs to be a different way of thinking. So that's one point I'd like to make and request you for an answer to that. And what are some of those challenges that B2C brands face in building the right portfolio of products? Because they've seen success, and they want to replicate this success across newer brands, newer categories, newer areas, and all that.
I think, we see that all the time, Ashutosh, when we keep interacting with a lot of businesses, we see a wide variety of responses. When you ask me the question on mindsets, we've interacted with large established CPG companies which have treated for many years e-commerce as just another channel. Oh, it's only 2% of my business. It's only 4% of my business. They have a very small team. They get any of their existing folks to say, hey, why don't you also look at e-commerce as a channel? If you The mindset issue is, I can treat that as a channel where I can just sell a bit of my volume also, because that's a channel that's come up, versus understanding what that capability of this channel, quote unquote channel, is, because it is giving you direct consumer access. It is allowing you to understand and circumvent some of the challenges of the traditional CPG model. So that's the difference in mindset that we see. And there are many other established firms which are today working with the same speed and agility that some of the startup entrepreneurs and companies have done. So that's a wide range, and I think the mindsets will apply in a way to both established CPG firms as well as startups. Like Manish said, as they grow big, they will have to institutionalize, they will have to have a scalable model in place. But the bigger mindset challenge is for established companies. It's like saying, oh, I have been successful doing this. Now, why can't I just keep doing this? And why do I need to change? So, the skilled manpower, the differentiating capabilities that will help you win in the future is going to be different from what has helped you today. Can we combine the two? You spoke about data. There are a few established CPG companies which are now investing in building direct consumer data. And 20 million, 30 million per year, trying to progressively build, because we are all moving towards a cookieless world, where it will not be easy to just pick some cookies and then be able to market. So if you have data about your consumers, if you know who are the consumers who are shopping, who are buying, premium personal care products, if that's the category you are in, you would need that understanding, because in a cookieless world, it's not, you can't just stop at bomb picking up a few cookies. So you need to invest in building your own first party consumer data, and it costs 50 rupees on an average to be able to build one consumer data set. And CPG business is all about being able to service a large mass of consumers. So it requires a very different capability. It requires a different mindset. I mean, it requires the marketing team to think, hey, I've been doing traditional mass TV advertising. Now you're telling me I need to build this capability for the future, which will help me now. I don't know whether this will play out or not. So being able to envision the change, the direction that business is moving towards, building those capabilities, investments, how do you balance? Because you can always invest more for the short term than build new capability for the medium term. That's where mindsets will clearly play out. And that's where, like decisions that you take about investments, where should I be investing? It's always like 1 foot today and 1 foot in tomorrow. So how do you get that balance right? How do you get your management teams to get that balance right? And if that's a challenge, maybe how do you set up a completely independent team and say, outside the corporate structure, and say, now I want you to build this. So that's the role of the leadership, to be able to judge and assess whether their management teams can evolve or whether they need a separate setup. Role of functional leadership will always be, how do I balance the budgets, the investments, what capabilities do I need to build in? It's interesting times, and we see a full spectrum out there. We see a lot of folks, a lot of teams which are still stuck with the old way of doing it, which are still treating it as a channel, and there are many others who are seeing the future in a very different way. So that's very interesting for us.
I just add on this, in addition to what I mean, the different experience. One experience we are working through right now, and where the company has really been able to move very fast, where they have carved out as a separate company, right? And as Harsh was saying, that it has to be across the function, across the whole business, because it is not wrong as well, because they are a large company and they need to comply with regulations, and also, and they are listed as well. So this is a trend, and as you could see also in the automobile sector, for electric vehicle, most of the companies are carving out a separate company, and that's the main reason, because they cannot work in the traditional setup of the business.
Okay, there's a question that has come, and this because we were speaking about data and the personalized data that is needed. Slightly different, slight variation from that. The question from Kartikeya Kumar, and this is, I'd ask Manish Chaudhary to take this, please. Competitive data intelligence in the e-commerce space in terms of sales and market share has been challenging to acquire. How are D2C brands looking to solve this?
See, we all talk about data. I can bet you we have data, but we still don't know how to use it well. So I'll keep it short. It's about how do you really make those data workable. Understanding a little, I continue to urge at least our departments where we can to understand consumers a little bit more deeper pre and post sale, just a little bit more, to leverage a little bit more on understanding what kind of problems they have, how many family members at home, which could be some vital tools. We also try to use or trying to build capabilities to understand a little bit more on how do our products work in different conditions and environments. So I would continue to say we all have piles of data. We are all getting hands-on now. How do you really like synchronize it into a better experience, better conversion? It's something which we are all getting a knack of. We are on the right path on that. But continue to urge that we have to get better on, at least at our end. Varun can chime in at his end, but our end we continue to. We built a company purely on what data we had at our end. very rarely dependent on third-party analysis data. So at our end, we continue to evolve in-house. That's from us.
Okay, Varun, since the question was also, Manish also suggested that you answer that. In addition, if you could also talk a little bit about, the other parts. I also wanted to talk to both of you about, while it's great to have a brand in the D2C space, how are you looking to get to the bigger pie, which is the traditional brick and mortar or the traditional business? There has to be some effort to reach out to that part as well. Varun.
Yeah, I think that's also honestly a little data oriented for us itself. I mean, the fact that we already have access to data which tells us which pin codes are buying from us, where do we have the best density in terms of the number of orders coming from pin codes, etc. Right? Can help come up with the right strategy in terms of which geographies to focus on first, and where you have highest probability, because there is also already an aware consumer who's transacting with you, and that they would also do it in a different retail environment, which is the physical retail environment, right? So I think we use data to arrive at that strategy as well, and that's how we've been approaching it. And like Manish mentioned, I think the data journey only sort of starts when you have data in terms of millions of data points, right? I mean, before that, the cohorts and statistical significance of most of the things that you're doing is not there, and you're actually better off actually doing qualitative conversations and arriving at decisions than using small set of data to do micro marketing or to do cohort pieces. So and we are at that stage and scale now that we're using the large amounts of data that we have to figure out different kind of modeling, from trends to micro profiling of consumers, to personalization and recommendations, etc. Right? So I think clearly that is the future, and that's the big differentiator also.
Mhm. Anurag, we'll take some questions now because there are a few of them coming. There's a question, and Anurag, maybe you'd like to go for this. With COVID lockdown, there was a huge surge in e-commerce. Will this continue once everything opens up, or how are you planning to cope up with that change? Okay, maybe the last part is to the companies, but the broader issue of whether this will continue, is that change in the mind of the consumer probably a permanent one?
I would answer it slightly differently. Obviously, what COVID did was it forced a lot of consumers to interact online. And while that trend was already there, and we had a certain level of digital fluency which was going up year on year, number of consumers who were buying online versus those who were on the internet, we always had 1:4 kind of a ratio. Right? While if you had four on the internet, maybe only one of them was actually buying online. COVID forced or accelerated that journey. And many of them who've now been first-time buyers on e-commerce have found obviously convenience. So they've got used to it, they've settled with it. The hesitation is now no longer there. Beyond this, once COVID settles, it'll boil down back to when do I need convenience and when do I need an experience which maybe online commerce is not offering me. So there will be decision segments. If I am clear what I want, and if I want it conveniently, I would go and buy it on e-commerce as a channel. If I want maybe more inspiration, more exploration, I could think of going to a modern trade channel. If I want immediate availability, I would think of a local mom and pop store. So it's the consumer's choice. Depending on their need states, they would decide where they want to go. But clearly, the trend is irreversible as we see it. The growth rate might not be exactly as we have seen during COVID times. It might settle to somewhere in the middle progressively, but this is an irreversible trend. Eventually, consumers will choose. the channels based on their need states as they go forward.
Okay. Another question from Rohan Sen. This is probably for Harshvardhan. Is the reinvention of the supply chain and has the in the reinvention of the supply chain, has the environment been taken into account, and what is being done to on the point of emissions as well as packaging? How are companies looking at it, Harshvardhan?
Sorry, Ashutosh, I'm not very clear about the question. Can you please repeat?
Okay, I'll just read out. It's a little convoluted. In the reinvention of the supply chain, has the environment been taken into concern in being more conscious about emissions as well as packaging? So basically, the ESG concern is what I understand coming out here.
See, I think yes. Uh, Looking at the environment and everything, and I think consumers are becoming more conscious about it. I think the companies, the brands are certainly looking at solutions which are more sustainable in nature. And I think going forward, that is only going to increase. And it is not only going to be something, as a choice, though I would say in India, right now, the preference is driven more by cost value rather than the sustainability, etc. But in international markets, obviously, it has gone much more than that. And I think it's a matter of time that even in India, the millennials, the new set of consumers will ask and demand more of this from the brands that they consume.
You're on mute, Ashu.
Yeah. So our next question is from Joydeep Mukherjee. What kind of market share D2C is expected to capture from FMCG in the next 5 years? Now, this is a question I'd like everyone to take. Maybe Harshvardhan, if you could begin first.
See, what I would say, I think let's not worry about a specific number. I think what is important is that, yes, all of us believe there is a big opportunity and you need to have a strategy and a game plan around it. What do you do in that area, right? Rather than worrying about, whether it will give 10%, 15% or 20%. Yes, I think what is important is the pie is going to be big, large enough for all CPG companies, larger companies to focus in that area, right?
Okay. Varun, would you like to hazard a guess? I know it's a very broad question, but if you can just give the person asking, Joydeep Mukherjee, some sense of what it could look like.
Well, I think Anurag and Manish are in the business of clairvoyance and predicting the future much better than us, right? So I wouldn't be able to sort of talk about what kind of shares would we be able to take, but like I said, I think there is going to be a battle for shares because the number of brands are clearly going to exceed, and what FMCG companies clearly have enjoyed till now, which is 6 to 7 players enjoying the entire market, that will surely get challenged by brands. And the first place where that will happen is the D2C, where you'll still see a far more scattered market share and compared to what you see in the offline environment. Are the broad themes that I can talk about. But like I said, I think from predicting the future, Accenture can do the better job of that.
Okay, Manish, I'm sure you want to go take a go at that.
See, I have no other choice than being bullish, right? Because we're strong believers in that, right? So I'll just start off with something just for everybody just to think about. I hope we can at least try to get a poll in how much do you think India is buying, at least in our category? And I can tell you it's extremely small, right? It's nowhere close to what the West is participating, at least on convenience. I'm in the camp that COVID just accelerated consumer consumption online, and at the pace at which we will grow is going to be extremely explosive. We're very, very small at what you're seeing today, at least on the online opportunity, what we have. It's extremely small. I mean, there's so much of data flying all around. Some people say we have 5% of what e-commerce in our category is. Some say 10, but I can just tell you one thing: 5 plus billion 2025. Just think about how much percent everyone can just chew out of that. And I really think that it's really small today, and the opportunity lies huge with COVID or without COVID, post, pre. We're just about scratching the surface. So I have no other reason just to be more bullish, because this is something which we are passionate about chasing. But I can just assure you that it's going to be something explosive. Not too many consumers participate in this category online, because it's still a touch feel, very loyalty driven with large 6 to 7 large players. I'm in the same camp with Varun. It's going to quickly fragment around. With every 1% going to each individual, it's a huge revenue bump up for all. So I think it's long away. But do remember one thing: the D2C brands also are forced to go global today. Just a small insight for you guys: we're the first Indian beauty brand to be listed in 2,800 Walmart stores in the US, right? And that's all courtesy of digital. So I can bet you that there are going to be so many brands out of India globally ruling consumer demand. So it's huge opportunity going forward.
Okay, so there's another question, and if I can, let me just first read out the question. Local provision stores always sell the product where they get more commission. Okay, that's a observation or statement. What kind of strategy to penetrate these markets are companies adopting? Anurag, I'll probably focus on the larger question. How will that change happen? Because again, it requires a mindset change for the consumers as well.
No, I think ultimately, whether it is e-commerce, whether it's D2C brands or established FMCG firms, whether it is Kirana as a channel, we are all here to service the consumer. So when it comes to even D2C brands, eventually, while their route might be D2C led and digital led, but if they find that no, if I have to service my consumer, I have to go via the Kirana route also, I think that's a very natural path for even some of these brands. So ultimately, it's the Kirana owner has a limited shelf space and working capital. He or she will decide what is it that I can sell out there to the consumers. Maybe they'll replace some of the established brands and bring in the D2C brands on their shelf if the D2C brands are meeting consumer needs better. So I would see that, ultimately the consumer is winning. There will be hyper competition on e-commerce, D2C, established brands. Let there be that competition playing out, because ultimately the consumer is winning. Kiranas will also adopt. There is a lot of digitization of Kiranas also that's happening. There is a lot of not just B2C side. We are seeing B2B players, marketplaces coming up for B2B servicing of Kiranas. Today, FMCG distribution targets average once a week kind of service to a Kirana. The eB2B players which are coming in are now building infrastructure to service the Kiranas every day. Mm-hmm. So a lot is evolving given these new capabilities around digital data and technology that's coming in. A lot is evolving in terms of business models, whether B2C or B2B. Mm-hmm. And everybody is evolving. The Kirana will evolve, companies will evolve, D2C brands will evolve. Whoever obviously gets the consumer needs right, whoever services them with the best experience will win. And eventually this will settle down. We will see more stability going forward. Right now, it's a war of.
Mm-hmm. Okay, one question that I have to ask is that for analytics, and I'll ask both Harshvardhan and Manish Gupta about that. But first to you, Harshvardhan. How are you using analytics to drive the traditional business? And also, since I'm still stuck on that statement from you where you said you're excited about the opportunity in B2C. So how are you planning to use, or how are you using it for the B2C part of the business? You're on mute, Harshvardhan.
See, I think again, analytics is one area. Again, all companies are evolving. I wouldn't say we are there where we want to be, but yes, how do you use all the different data points that you have related to your consumers, the retailers, etc., and how do you improve the overall efficiency? How do you improve the overall cost? I think that is where the analytics right now is very, very important from the traditional way of marketing. From the perspective of D2C, I think there are many areas where the analytics can work. First of all is, I would say, which is, I think the core of any consumer business is the consumer preference. How do you understand the consumer trend, right? I think that is one area where, as a company, we would like to focus, where we would like to use analytics to understand in advance as to what are the next consumer trends, how do you invest behind them, right? And apart from that, as Manish said, there are so many datas which are already there with many players. Obviously that is only going to increase, but how do you collate all those datas in a manner where it becomes actionable for you? It's just not that you have enough data, right? So yes, I think uh, in D2C, there is an option to get many data points which might help you to target each and every consumers individually. That potential is there, which is not there in the traditional business.
Sure. So Manish, from your understanding, how do the traditional companies leverage data, and how can tomorrow the D2C brand, the upcoming D2C brands, leverage uh, analytics and grow faster so that they can come in competition with some of the established brands?
Right. So, I mean, from a traditional company, I think I would say data and analytics is I mean, the organizations needs to become data driven. I mean, as we are working with a large consumer goods company, the global company for their business. I mean, we have set up a analytics COE to run analytics across their functions. While during the session we have talked a lot about in the front end and how we can capture consumer preference, but there's a lot of analytics which needs to be done from a supply chain perspective. Because imagine a company which was reaching to thousands of, hundred thousands of distributors in India. Now, with this brand on B2C, they have to reach to billion of consumers, right? And the amount is changing and the preferences are changing, their pack sizes are changing because they were producing a different pack size. For e-commerce, they have to do a different pack size, right? So all that analytics is required. So analytics, first of all, as Manish was saying, and as Harsha said, there's a lot of data existing, right? First, we need to get to fundamentals. So get the data right? I mean, whether it start making sense, put a bit of an infrastructure, and then embed into the part of the system and leverage all the external data. There's a lot of data enabled through Nielsen. There's a lot of data enabled through the hyperscalers, third party, first party, we all talked about, and start leveraging the use cases in order to make decision around it across the spectrum, right? And that's what we are doing with a large consumer goods company in India across their functions. Now, I think with all the companies, right, in the startups who are, I would say, young digital native companies, they're already using data, right? I mean, their fundamental business starts with them in terms of capturing, as Manish and Varun was saying, they already have data, right? So it's not that their reimagination of the product is based on some hypothesis. I mean, they are leveraging the data from outside. So I think the more we leverage the data in terms of, in fact, as I was saying during the session, when we were talking to some of the retailers, that how data can help them to increase the footfall on the stores as well, how they can capture the different type of consumers because they have not been capturing around that, right? And how, so a lot of possibilities around it, but I think they have to start with basics because a lot of companies in India are still need to set the base on the basics on data.
Okay. So, the interesting point that you mentioned also was about at the retail stores and for some of the traditional companies. Anurag, I think this could be the last question. So, can you set a little bit of a context? we have B2C brands at one end and the traditional companies at one end. There will be a time in the near future, hopefully not too far in the future, where some of them will come closer to each other, where one acquires the other capability. How is that landscape going to look like in a few years from now?
I think, clearly we will see convergence happening. Today we are seeing digital native businesses emerging purely on the back of some of the online access to consumers. We are seeing established CPG companies leveraging and getting into the D2C space, getting the mindsets right, skills right, business models right. So eventually we will see convergence. We will see D2C companies or digital native companies adopting some of the other established models of the established CPG companies and vice versa. And we should see convergence where every CPG player would have a mix of as they scale up. Obviously, initially it could be much lower. It could be very select chosen models, but as they become larger and at scale, they will converge. We are seeing that happening across in other sectors. If you just take pure retail, there were pure online retailers and there were pure offline retailers. Both of them are now converging. Pure online retailers, which came up, are also setting up their stores because cost of customer acquisition online in retail can be very expensive. So they are setting up stores, whereas pure offline retailers are setting up their online platforms. So we will ultimately see convergence. We are seeing that sector after sector. New capabilities which help you service your consumer better has to be adopted by either the startups and the digital natives or by established brick and mortar companies. So that's the convergence I see. I don't see multiple business models at scale sort of playing out. Eventually, they will all converge to something very near to each other because it's about consumer behavior. It's about servicing the consumer in the best way.
Okay, thanks so much for all the interesting conversations, everyone. I'd like to thank Harshvardhan Agrawal, Director at Emami, Varun Alag, co-founder and CEO at Onasa Consumer, Manish Chaudhary, co-CEO at Wow Skin Science, Manish Gupta, Managing Director and Client Group Lead, Products at Accenture, and of course, Anurag Gupta, Managing Director and Lead Strategy and Consulting at Accenture. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for the very interesting conversations. There are so many other things to discuss, so we'll have lots to also connect about. I have a request to make. If this were, and we're forced by the situation, we are in a situation where we have to do everything online. If this were happening at a conference center, we take a group photograph. So we'll take a group photograph right here. So while all of you look at the picture, look at the screen, and look at the camera before you, and just give us about 10 seconds or 15 seconds maybe. Okay, we're done. That's good enough. Thank you so much again for being with us and with the conversations. Of course, there is so much to discuss, as I said, that the conversations will continue, and we would like to track some of what the companies are doing as well, both the B2C companies as well as the traditional companies. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.